In the previous video, we saw the front end of our COVID-19 dashboard. To recall, it is a React.js based front-end application that fetches the data from the external service. In this video, we are going to see how to build the API and Node.js project for fetching data. We'll cover project overview and features, Setupan configuration, API endpoints and data flow, key code walkthrough, deployment and best practices. This is going to be very exciting. Let's dive in. We will be using Node.js and Express to build the API. Before we start, we need to have the following installed: Node.js installed, Postman to test out the REST APIs, and Visual Studio Code as text editor. All these softwares are freely available for every major OS. I have included the links to all these softwares in the description. Once you have installed these softwares, you will be good to move to the next step. Understand our data source, which in this case is Rapid API. First, open up the site https://rapidapi.com/api/covid-93. Once the page loads, you can see some helpful sections offered by Rapid API like API overview, version, and endpoints. Let's take a look at the overview section. Overview would be selected by default, but if it's not, click API overview on the top left side. You can just review and go through this section to see the details of the API. Usage of the API is free at the time of this video. There is also a button to test out the endpoints. This is a great feature as it will generate the sample request for you and also act as a playground for you to test out the API. If you click the test button, you will see the screen shown here. On the top, there are tabs for app, params, headers, and so on. I am not going into great details about it. However, feel free to check it out. If you need any assistance, just drop me a comment and I will come back to you. If you scroll down, you will see the country's endpoint. You can see the parameters it accepts along with parameter details. They have also given the sample response. So looking at the response, we see count of countries in the results key. We also see that the list of countries is returned in the JSON array. Moving forward, we see the endpoint statistics. From their site we read, this endpoint reflects the current status of the spread of the coronavirus in all countries. The good part is that we can get either stats of all the countries or for a single country. They have also given the information on the parameters that are to be accepted. If we scroll down, we can see the sample response for this endpoint. We can see that the response key contains the country along with cases, deaths, and tests. Likewise, there is an endpoint for history that tells us all the information about the entry history of statistics. Again, like we saw in the case of country and statistics, we get the information on the parameters along with sample URLs. They have also given sample responses to inspect before using the API. One last thing, you will need to sign up for this API. When you sign up, you will get Xrapid API host and Xrapid API key. These values you will need to pass in the header when calling the API. More on this later. Now let's utilize this API. Now that we have seen the APIs exposed by Rapid API, it's time to call these APIs from our Node.js API. First, we will need to initialize the project. To do so, run the command shown on the screen in the terminal. Go with the default options. Those options are good for us as of now. Once we are done, we will need to install the dependencies in our project. We need to install Express, Request, and .env packages. For this, run these small commands shown in the terminal. Wait for a while. It might take some time to install the packages. We need Express for running the server, Request to call the Rapid API, and .env to store the environment variables. Your package.json file should look something like the one shown on the screen. Once you have these packages installed, you are ready to move to the next section. The countries API is going to call the Rapid API to fetch the countries. Because the Rapid API exposes two endpoints for the countries, we will also make two methods to call these APIs. The first method will return all the countries, and the second will only name of the country as parameter. In your project root, create a new folder called countries. Inside this, add a new file called index.js. Inside it, add the code shown on the screen. This code sets up an Express router to handle HTTP GET requests for retrieving country-related data from Rapid API country endpoint. The router begins by importing necessary modules, including Express, a constants file that we earlier created, the request library for HTTP calls, and environment variables using .env. The first root / handles a basic GET request without any parameters. It sets the response header to JSON, constructs a URL using predefined constants, and configures request options with API headers fetched from environment variables. The router then makes an HTTP GET request to the external API, and if the response status is 200, it forwards the API response to the client. Otherwise, it returns a 400 error. The second route accepts a dynamic parameter representing a region or country name. It first checks if the parameter exists and responds with a 400 error if it doesn't. Otherwise, it constructs a URL with a search query parameter and follows a similar process as the first route, setting headers, making an API request, and handling the response. If successful, it sends the API data back to the client. Otherwise, it returns an error. Finally, the router is exported for use in other parts of the application. This setup allows for flexible country data retrieval either by fetching all countries or searching for a specific region. You will find the complete code at my GitHub repository. Link in the description. The statistics endpoint also exposes two endpoints, one with country and one without it. If we pass the name of the country as argument, then we will get the stats for that country. Or if we don't pass, then we will get the stats of all the countries combined as we had seen in the description of the API. Again, in your project, add a new folder called statistics. Inside this, create a new file called index.js. Add the code shown on the screen. The code is very similar to the country road code we just saw, so I will skip the explanation here. Finally, we are left with the history controller. In your project directory, create a new folder called history. Inside this folder, add a new file called index.js. Inside this, add the code shown on the screen. Again, the code is very similar to what we just saw in the stats and country controllers. This wraps our code to call the external API, in our case Rapid API, from our Node.js application. You will find the complete code in my GitHub repository. This sums up our code for the Node.js API for Covid-19 dashboard. While we have built our API fetching data from Rapid API, we need to run the API with our front end and deploy it on Vercel. Deployment will enable us to share our work with the whole world. For this, stay tuned as it's going to be more exciting. If you have missed part 1, I have added the link in the description. You can also find the help links, including the link to the code in the description. If you have any other ideas or topics on which you want me to build content, let me know. If you like this content and want to see more such content, consider subscribing. Thanks.